Hi everyone, Harry here from Good Data. Welcome to this month's episode of our Ask an Expert live series. Each month we cover a new data analytics related topic and invite an expert along to answer some of my questions as well as some questions from the audience if we have time. Today we'll be covering the hot topic of analytics as code. Analytics as code, you ask? It's kind of a new concept, but fear not, we'll reveal all shortly. Before we do, let me introduce today's guest, Tom Gabik. Hey, Tom, welcome to the show.
Hi, Harry. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on board. Thanks. Tom is a principal sales engineer here at Good Data with the task of demonstrating the analytics as code philosophy. I guess we can call it a philosophy to our prospective customers. We'll cover kind of what analytics code actually is, why you should care about it, and which bits you should pay kind of extra special attention to. We'll cover these areas and more, but as always, if you have any further questions in mind, feel free to pop them into the comments. And if we have time at the end, we'll do our best to answer them. Let's jump in. Firstly, Tom, before we dig into the meaty questions, tell us a bit about your day-to-day at Good Data.
Yeah, sure. So I basically started in the internal BI, creating analytics from scratch. And right now I'm in a position where I'm basically talking to our customers or potential prospects about their current analytics needs and whether good data might actually be the fit for them from the technical perspective, let's say.
So keep them pretty busy then.
Oh, yeah. It's always good to be busy, especially in this area.
Analytics as code. What does it actually mean?
Well, let's say that it is a paradigm shift in which code plays a crucial role in orchestration and management of the analytics workflow. It's probably a complicated set of words, right? But imagine that everything that you're going to be creating inside any BI tool can be easily accessible, exportable, importable, changeable through the code. The amount of benefits this usually brings is something that we will hopefully cover during the session, but to highlight some of the key ones or the ones that come to mind, the BI, whether it's going to be internal or whether you're planning to embed the analytics into your application, is always going to come with changes. And the automation and management of those changes in bulk will likely never be possible through just simple UI widgets. So like clicking a couple of things here and there. The likelihood of you reaching the limit of that is pretty high. So for instance, that's one of the things. If we talk about the second one, we can talk about version control and other, let's say, software development best practices that the analytics as a code concept brings to the table. For some reason, in BI, we often tend to see this omitted. Someone needs a quick adjustment of the metric dashboard, add a new field here and there. And the BI teams are used to quickly delivering on those tasks. This sometimes means that there is a new pipeline, new worksheet, new analytical project, new metric created every day, right? And this gradually increases the inconsistencies that we're going to be facing. So the analytics as a code is a really healthy tool, or like I said, paradigm that might actually help in those areas. And of course, the ability for technical users to define and add functionalities which would otherwise be proprietary and locked behind the vendor's doors. That's probably one thing that deserves to be mentioned.
Okay, so to clarify, it's analytics as code isn't kind of, it's not making everyone have to work through code. It's really bringing the ability to work through code and bringing things across from kind of like software engineering sort of workflows, DevOps workflows into the analytics sphere so that people who do work with code can work with it more and more effectively.
That's a great question. Yeah, so you still have to keep different personas related to the BI in mind. And then one of those personas is always going to be the one that just looks at the dashboard, creates a simple report or insight, and then wants to view those numbers change, right? So it's not going to be something extremely technically complicated. Especially in the embedded analytics use case, you don't want the end users to be overwhelmed. So the analytics as a code concept is not aimed at those people. It's more on the developers themselves that are going to make sure that are going to have a fun and that they're going to enjoy the fact that there is this openness and that level of flexibility when it comes to management of the pipelines and all the analytics itself.
Makes sense. Why the kind of shift towards this sort of new concept or paradigm?
I mean, I think we briefly touched it during the last question, but BI usually tends to run a little wild. We still probably live in a world where most of the analytics is going to be happening in Excel or Google Sheets. Not to say that those tools are necessarily bad, but building a long-lasting and well-governed project is probably going to be tough there. More often than not, those tools will make sure that you arrive to the desired result quite quickly and share the outcome with the desired audience and move to a different task. But sometimes we see that like reusing those projects and making sure that you build something more long lasting is probably let's say the stage where the analytics is moving to. So the likelihood, so moving away from like the Excel and of course the hundreds other BI tools on the market that offer the capabilities similar to Excel, creating a better charts, pivot tables, better looking area charts is probably not what is going to be the next big thing, right? You don't necessarily need to invest in better visualizations. You probably, we see that most customers or some customers come to us with the need of, instead of creating new visualizations, a better looking one, they're coming to us with potentially a problem of inconsistency, so of different of different versions of the same number arriving to a completely different results. So this is something that the analytics as a code can potentially solve, because it again gives you the ability to manage everything programmatically, and if adopting that concept well, you will be probably able to basically push the BI tool to another level.
Sure. So it's kind of about efficiency, consistency, and yeah, enabling the sort of the more automation and more collaboration within the environment.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right.
To break it down a bit further, and you have kind of covered some of them, but what are the kind of like the components of analytics as code, the specific tools or features or things that kind of you would say like live under or would be kind of included in the kind of analytics as code, let's call it a workspace for want of a better word?
Yeah, sure. So if or when the paradigm shift is going to be accepted and adopted as a new standard, I'm expecting a whole lot of software development kits and SDKs to be popping around. Here, like if we're talking good data specifically, where we watched with enthusiasm the wider adoption of tools like Python, Pandas, Jupyter Notebooks, or DeepNote, for instance, on the market, and we're seeing that a lot of the people are actually seeing a value of those tools. So what analytics as a code concept brings onto the table is linking it to it's nicely linked to our vision, basically, utilization of those tools with the analytics as a code. So in good data, we basically have the Python SDK, we have the Pandas. We actually recently introduced our IDE, which would again make the life of the developers much easier. Of course, adding to that is the possibility that you can export all of those bits and pieces of the analytical environment into human readable data serialization languages like YAML or JSON. That's also really important. I would say, like, taking step back from the tooling itself, the concept that currently makes good data unique is the fact that everything that you do inside the environment in the UI or potentially through APIs or something like that can be easily exportable, can be worked with as a code. So that's a pretty key prerequisite, because in the end, all the metrics, all the dashboards, all the reports, logical data models, user management, data permissions, all those bits and pieces that are linked to the analytical project that you're building can be easily exportable as a code and can be worked with as such.
Okay, yeah. That kind of, linking back to the kind of the whole collaborative sort of effort that it's trying to promote.
Exactly.
And I guess, I mean, again, we've touched on it, but how does the concept help to improve the developer experience? You've already mentioned the fact that obviously all of the different components can be kind of worked through code. Is there anything else kind of on top of that to be aware of or to highlight?
Mainly, I would say the massive amount of flexibility that it gives to the developer. So providing you with the tooling that so especially like when it comes to the tooling that we discussed in the previous question, the tooling gives the developers the massive amount of flexibility. So whether it's about the need of changing something in potentially hundreds of different environments, different worksheets, let's put a practical example there. So let's say that you are going to have a metric definition change, and you want to potentially provision that change to hundreds of your environments. That would potentially be pretty tricky. But since you have the possibility of defining that as a code, the environment can be exported, the metric can be changed, and automatically and programmatically this can then be propagated to the environments that you want it to be propagated to. And that, again, for the developer or for the data engineers, I would say, because I don't necessarily want to be talking about just developers, but I think we're going to reach a stage where Python is going to be a relatively basic thing, like SQL is for data analysts, right? So I would say that even those personas are going to be able to do that.
Yep. Any other kind of benefits to highlight? I mean, I think you've kind of outlined a number of them. Is there anything else you can think of in general about this approach that
I think? Yeah, I think to be honest, like I'm sure that you're gonna refer our listeners to the article, but our colleague Laurie did a pretty great summarization, and I'm just gonna borrow some of those topics from there. The flexibility and customization, that's absolutely key there. So highly customizable workflows which will fit the changing needs of the organization. The control and reusability. So again, the ability to work with the analytics as a code gives you the ability to version it, to have the access to who changed what, always have the repository available, make sure that the correct fork is being used, and so on and so on. Collaboration and version control. So again, you know what the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, because everyone can work with the same definition of the analytics. I would say automation and scaling. So again, that goes back to probably one of the first things that I mentioned. You don't necessarily want to rely on the user interfaces when making massive amount of changes. You want to make sure that there is the ability to do those changes in bulk. And one of the key one is probably going to be the accuracy and reliability of the analytics outcome, because if you're going to have the strong foundations, and if you know that whoever is going to do changes, you know who did those changes, and you know that those changes are propagated to A to Z, you have the ability to actually rely on the numbers and have some belief into what is presented to you when it comes to the BI itself. And I probably want to add one last thing that's probably not what Laurie's article is mentioning, but I would say that it is actually a pretty key foundation. The analytics as a code concept is for the AI-driven future, and I think we're going to see a lot of. I genuinely believe that good data is positioned in a pretty good way to deal with the AI start, or let's say boom, because analytics as a code is probably going to be a massive component which is going to accelerate a lot of things.
Yep, I agree. And more will be revealed on that soon, or at least from the good data's point of view. But I'm sure the market as a whole is trending in that kind of direction with AI. So I think there's lots of exciting things to come from that. And as you say, analytics as code clearly sets those foundations there for it to be a kind of effectively implemented. Anything else I want to ask you? I think that kind of wraps things up. Actually, no, we haven't covered one thing. As with any kind of new concept, there's all these great benefits, but of course, there's going to be challenges. There might be things that, some pitfalls or things that traps people fall into or whatever. Can you think of any that obvious candidates to mention here?
Yeah, again, like I briefly touched it, and I also countered that point. But the technical expertise is definitely something that might seem tricky. I'm really glad that you asked that question about like whether now everyone needs to have the ability to code. That's not the idea. But for the analytics as a code to be widely adopted, it would require, at least at the beginning, some level of technical expertise. It might mean that you just need to learn a couple of examples in Python, right? It might mean that you just need to ask ChatGPT the right questions to give you the right Python script, right? Those are all the options that you have now.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that for the BI personas, whether it's data engineer, potentially a senior data analyst, it opens up a road to work with Python, with APIs. Don't be afraid of it, and kind of understand the value it brings. So that's probably one of the challenge, yes. But on the other hand, it opens up another set of interesting skills that people might acquire.
Sure.
Yes, and I would say so. Of course, that links tightly to some level of training and skill development, which can be happening within the existing teams. The complexity and learning curve might be steep for someone, but I'm just guessing that especially with the right documentation and with like the guidance and understanding of what can be done quite quickly in the first few steps, it's easy to overcome. And it deserves to be said, because I think I mentioned it as one of the benefits, that like maintenance and consistency is one of the benefits. But of course, when it becomes when the analytical project becomes big, and even the code itself can actually get pretty messy. And from the software development practices, we know that as well. So as analytics workflows will evolve and expand, maintaining will require processes, testing, and like documentation best practices,
Mm-hmm.
which is again something that, for instance, if you're just creating a really quick and dirty uh, Excel workbook, you don't necessarily need that.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, again, it's about scale. As things scale up, then of course these processes need to be taken into account. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple questions in the comments section. Let's take a look. First one from Martin. Are there any kind of other areas where the kind of as code approach is gaining traction outside of analytics as code?
Yeah, sure. So we see that concept being adopted in DevOps as code, infrastructure as code, and the advantages and disadvantages are always relatively similar. So in terms of the infrastructure as code, the notion of managing everything through simple UI interface became too tedious. So it became clear that changing something within the infrastructure world would also require, especially within the bulk changes area, it will require code-based approach. So again, specifically linked to that, to the benefits that analytics as a code brings, it's still the same thing: the flexibility, scalability, faster provisioning of changes, and the rapid speed of implementation are all the things that this brings to the table.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah. So similar again, kind of where scale is involved. Then it's a similar.
Yeah,
approach.
exactly. And adopting the software development best practices to an area which probably benefits from that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And another question here from Teresa. Are there kind of some practical examples of advantages analytics as code brings? I think we covered it, but to list a few practical examples of the advantages.
Yeah, I mean, like internally in Good Data, we were playing with, for instance, metadata localization, right? So when it comes to the BI world, we often see that, like, of course, the ability to translate something from one language to the other is okay, as long as you know what is actually happening inside the environment. So for those fixed dashboard names and stuff like that, that's pretty easy. But if you were to translate easily whatever you're creating inside the environment, so all the metrics, all the dashboards, all the insights, and all the things like that, you're giving them certain names, you're giving them certain values that it will become tedious to translate. But with the analytics as a code approach, you can easily export everything that you did inside the UI. And then what you can do is basically run any third-party service that can translate those bits and pieces and basically spit it out in a different language. So that's one practical examples that I've been like recently involved with, and that I think is pretty cool. And again, without the possibility of exporting everything, exporting all that metadata through one simple API call, it wouldn't be possible.
Sure. No, that makes sense. I think that kind of outlines it well. Okay, I think that's all we have time for. That wraps up today's episode. Thanks, Tom, for answering all of my questions. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I hope we created a solid picture of the whole analytics as code kind of concept, philosophy, and why it's important, and why we think that will be kind of a major trend within the analytics space. If you want to find anything more about it, as Tom mentioned, we have some kind of analytics as code related articles and content. Head to our website, gooddata.com, or to the comments section. We'll post some of the links there after the session here. Again, thanks all, and hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
Thanks, Harry.